One of the things that I loved is the sense of community spirit, the closeness that I feel to Melbourne. I'm so grateful. You know, it'll make me tear up talking about it. Like, just so grateful to Melbourne. What a place, you know.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Chefs find inspiration from many things, from travel, kitchens they've cooked in, the seasons, produce, and the key moments in their lives. Some are influenced by their childhood upbringing and immerse themselves in their natural surrounds as adults to seek and find their culinary voice. Ben Shewry is one of the world's most celebrated chefs and owner of acclaimed restaurant Attica in Melbourne. Ben, how are you going?
Hey, good. Good, thanks. Nice to be with you.
I understand you've gone a bit out on a limb for Father's Day.
We always go out on a limb for Father's Day, I think, in these unusual times. But yes, we've bitten off a little bit more than we can chew right on this very day.
Tell us a bit about that. What have you been doing today to get ready for Father's Day?
Well, because the lockdowns here in Melbourne, we only find out about them at very last minute. So we never really know sort of week to week or fortnight to fortnight if they'll be extended. And we can make our own predictions, but we can't really go and sell menus for an uncertain future. You know, so we're trying to balance whether or not we'd be able to reopen the restaurant or whether or not we need to flip to takeaway and sell that and cancel the bookings. So even with Father's Day, we only really found out, you know, a few days ago that we were going to have to do takeaway for Father's Day. So even that in itself is not really ideal, but the fact is that you still have to just do it. But one of the ideas that Matt Boyle, the head chef, had when we were discussing Father's Day, he was like, "Oh, we should do a dad's only chocolate bar." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a pretty cool idea." You know, like thinking about my own father who loves chocolate and really sort of hides his chocolate a little bit, especially from his kids. So I was like, "That's a great idea." And we should, you know, I'm like, "We should call it dad's only," you know. So we'll make Matt's like, "It should be fruit and nut," you know. And he's like, Matt's quintessential Australian man, if you like. So I take my cues about what that might be from him. And so I said, "Well, all right, fruit and nuts sounds good. Let's do that." And I thought about it. We're going to need a few hundred of them. And initially I thought, somebody would be able to probably make those for us. And just as I sort of surveyed the landscape of chocolate manufacturing, or boutique chocolate manufacturing, I pretty quickly realised that wasn't going to be the case. And so in between trying to determine whether or not somebody would make them for us or whether we should make them ourselves, I decided to make them ourselves. So I went and bought the moulds and sourced the chocolate, and never having made them ever before, I should add, having an incredibly small amount of chocolate work in my career and none of it with bars, I thought, well, we'll give it a crack, won't we? So we did give it a crack. But as it's turned out, the funny thing is that the actual bar making itself has not been particularly difficult because we have really superior moulds and all of the equipment, and I have a great tutor to problem solve any type of situation. Kirsten Tibbles, who's a renowned chocolatier, so she's on the phone should I have a problem. But that hasn't actually been the issue. We know how to temper chocolate and put it in a mould and take it out of a mould. We've worked that out. But the wrapping of them, they're quite an awkward shape, kind of akin to a Cadbury, like one of those sort of individual serves of Cadbury chocolate, but twice as thick. Not like the one you might have seen in the photo. That was a mock-up. So we've got these quite difficult to wrap chocolate bars, and I had to do it in front of 6 eager chocolate bar wrappers this morning, and I couldn't. So I had to say to them, "Listen, just give me 5 minutes by myself, please, and I'll work it out." So I went away and worked it out, and like everything we kind of do is very precise. So, you have to measure the piece of tinfoil that you're going to wrap the chocolate bar in to the millimetre and then wrap it, and it's got to be a certain way. And then we had some neat labels custom printed. We have a printer down the street in Ripponlea who does all our printing. He's really super. And Yumi. So Yumi printed the labels, and then I had to show them how to wrap it and then put the label on. And we were all very pleased with the product, except it just took so long to wrap one damn chocolate bar.
Well, the last year and a half has been challenging for everyone, and Melbourne's had an extraordinary amount of days in lockdown. How different is your cooking, and how much has it changed since the days of Attica before COVID?
It's funny with cooking. My cooking background is incredibly modest. A very humble background that I came from. I didn't come from a fine dining restaurant background. So for me, it's quite natural to return to cooking that's more homely. I wouldn't say it's simpler cooking. It's still very attention to detail focused. Every layer of the thousands of lasagnas that we've made is individually weighed. Each weight. Yeah, so every layer of bolognese, there's 4 layers of bolognese. It's weighed. The bechamel's weighed. Everything is. It's about being very precise and making sure that people get the same thing that they ordered when they got it last time, and consistent. That's comforting. That consistency in a hard time. So, it's very similar in some ways. In fact, probably more than people know, my cooking at Attica is based on home cooking, because that's actually what I know best. And the restaurant cooking that I did growing up in New Zealand was quite simple. I did a lot of buffet work. I did a lot of breakfast work. So I don't come from a fine dining background, and it's actually probably why I don't really like eating at great many fine dining restaurants, if I'm being completely honest with you, or certainly only like eating at the delicious ones, And people will be outraged hearing me say that, but not all fine dining restaurants are delicious, unfortunately. I think deliciousness is like an underrated thing, and you would think that would be obvious to want to make a delicious menu, but some people want to make menus that just push the boat out, I suppose. But for me, so it's different, but it's not so far apart. It's very labour intensive, the work that we're doing now during these lockdowns. Obviously, the food cost is really high as well, because we're selling. Normally we sell meals from $330 per person, and right now we're selling meals from $30 per person. And that's quite a big difference.
Take us back to your childhood. You talked about the sort of modest background that you come from. What role did food play in your life as a kid back in New Zealand?
It's a huge role. I was thinking as I was walking up the stairs to my office before talking to you about what a blessed life, I've had. It certainly hasn't been a perfect life, but it has been a blessed life. I've had many amazing things in my life, and it begins with my childhood. And I think of those early years with such great fondness. I think to a point we maybe all romanticize our youth. If it was a pleasant childhood, I certainly had a very loving childhood. I had a very complete family unit, and my mother and my father are both amazing people in different ways. And I think we had a very, very creative kind of upbringing, because money wasn't plentiful. So, but love and generosity and cooking and food was, because we were primary producers. We were cooking the foods that we were growing and finding on the farm and the wilds surrounding us. That's all we ate, really. So vegetables from my mother's garden, and sheep and cattle from the farm, and then from the wild, pigs, goat, whitebait, all manner of things from the ocean, berries, plants, all part of natural kind of diet that just wasn't a big deal at all. It wasn't even a thing, and it was funny, really, if you think about, my story and maybe the changes in modern cooking in the last 15 years as wild foods became popular yet again, and they certainly wasn't the first round of them being popular in restaurants, but it was just really like a natural thing to me. I was obviously doing it at Attica before it was a fashionable thing. and started to harvest from the wild 15 years ago for the menu here, because I was struggling to find any personality in the ingredients from the markets and from the suppliers at the point in time.
Do you remember any dishes or feasts from your youth that really stand out as memories for you?
Yeah, several. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am, and I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in Australia without having the great gift of Maori culture bestowed, upon me as a New Zealander, as a Pakeha, so a white New Zealander. I have Maori cousins and friends, and culture was very, very large in my childhood. On the farm, it was large because there were pās in the district, in the area, now Maori hill forts, and my father would tell me about those hill forts and what purpose they were, why they were there on the landscape, and also talk about the invasion of New Zealand by the English and the land wars that ensued afterwards in Taranaki, where I'm from. Was a real strong Maori stronghold, and the warriors there held out for a very, very long time. And so there was evidence of those wars, lead bullets shot in the banks of, the hills on our farm. And we lived close to a marae, which is a traditional Maori meeting place. And when we were invited there to do hangi and to partake in culture, those were very transformative things to a young child. And hangi, the New Zealand Maori earth oven, it was a very, very common thing for that to be happening in my life. I've talked about this a lot in the past, but birthdays and fates and school events. Did my first one myself when I was 10. But it really, really, really loomed large. Actually, this one time, my uncle Kerry, he ran the longest-running folk festival called the Tahora Folk Festival, which started out tiny and became quite big on his farm in Tahora, which is out the back of Taranaki in the back country of New Zealand. You think really sort of hilly, in Australia you would think they were mountains, but they were here. They're hills in New Zealand, and sort of very green and very lush, but a lot of bush, a lot of wilds, dark and dank. And very moist, very fertile, volcanic soils. That's my Uncle Kerry's farm. And so we had this folk festival there, and there was this hangi that it was a communal sort of an event. So every night there'd be a different sort of way of cooking. One of the favourite ways from it was that everybody we used to have a lot of potluck dinners, so everybody would bring a pot up to the main meeting place of the festival, and everybody would share each other's food. And my favourite meal from all of that shared food was a pot of boiled spaghetti. It was cooked in an aluminium billy can that was all black and crusted on the outside. That was my favourite meal. And on one of the other nights of the festival, which was tradition to do a hangi, and a huge hangi, because hangi can feed hundreds and hundreds of people if you make a big enough fire and big enough pit. And my uncle had asked these group of men and boys to go over the back of the farm and kill a few wild geese. And by a few, he meant, I don't know how many he meant, but he didn't mean a lot. And there was a lot of what we would call townies at the festival, city folks. And they were pretty excited to go on this hunt. And I tagged along because I tagged along on everything, because I was an incredibly curious child, and I'm a very, very curious adult. And so I tagged along at the back of the lines. This procession of men and boys started to tramp across the farm and up the gully. And they had like a collection of sort of warlike instruments that they were taking with them, things like, baseball bats or cricket bats, probably more likely, and sticks, and somebody had a machete, knives, and whatever they'd kind of mustered, probably, like a fence batten. And they, there was this sort of anticipation, that we're going on this hunt, and eventually we came up through the valley and we came across the geese, and they basically, trapped them by chasing them up a gully, so they basically couldn't get away any further. And they lost their minds. They the saying bloodlust. That was what it was, bloodlust. They went crazy and they slaughtered all of the geese, like brutally. They beat them all to death right before me. It was horrible. It was horrifying. And my father is very sensitive and very particular about how you take a life to eat, take meat to eat. He always said, like on hunts in the bush, that you never take more than you need, and everything that you shoot, it's not for sport, it's to sustain you. So you only take enough so that you can sustain your life, and you understand how important it is to take that life. And so this was bewildering to me to watch these people go mad like this. And when they settled down and they kind of came to their senses, they realised that they hadn't really done the right thing, and I think they felt bad. And so their shame, they only took a small handful of the geese and they left the rest to rot in the paddock, and they walked back to the camp. And I was crying because, it was like super upsetting to a kid, like it's just a horrible thing to see. And, I'd seen my dad, dispatch plenty of lambs and cattle over the time, but not like that, not brutally and carefully, and only one or two, And so I got back and I went straight up to my uncle. My Uncle Kerry, he's quite well known for his temper. And I told him what happened, and he lost his mind. He was so angry. And he, I remember him screaming at the men because they were really dishonest about it, and he screamed at them. And I remember there's this saying, I don't know if it's okay to swear on your podcast, but there's a saying that that farmers in New Zealand will say to their dogs, and it's "get in behind, you fucking mongrel," when they're mustering. They scream it though; it's high pitched, and it sounds angry, but it's kind of not angry. But it's a way of talking to the dog to get them to do what you want when they're not doing it. And that was how my uncle talked to those men, like they were a pack of dogs. And he sent them back. And they had to go back and get all the slaughtered geese, and they had to pluck every last one. Now, I don't know if you've ever plucked a goose, but it's unpleasant at the best of times. We're so disconnected from the animals we eat. If you have to pluck a chicken, that is unpleasant and hard work, but let alone a goose. So I don't know how many there were, 50 or 60. But I can't really remember. I was a child, but there was a lot. And, geese, they have a particular smell as they cook. So they all went into the hungy, they're buried beneath the earth, and the hot stones and flax are below them, and the geese are sitting on top of them, and they're steaming in their earth oven covered with soil. And that smell, though, is very particular to goose meat. And that's something that's an incredibly strong memory of my childhood. We all ate goose meat that night, and I'll never forget that.
These experiences that you had back in New Zealand, did they help with the relationships that you started to forge in Australia with the Indigenous communities to delve into the world of native ingredients here?
They did. They have a great deal. Very slowly, though, I had been told about the many myriad of problems that Australia had in relation to its First Nations people and the poor treatment of them. So when we were kids in the schoolyard, we had terrible, sad stories about what Australians did to Aboriginal people, for example. When my father and my mother had been in Coober Pedy and in Queensland in the 60s and the 70s and had witnessed things that I won't repeat on this podcast, things that are so brutal and so horrible that you couldn't imagine that another human would treat, a human that way. So I had a pretty strong sense of the injustice of First Nations people in Australia. And that scared me a little bit at first because I was like, wow, I don't want to be this white guy coming from Australia and making things worse by mucking up their food and their culture. So it was just a very slow and careful process into that world. And I took time to build meaningful and lasting friendships. And, it continues to this day. And those friendships and those experiences with Aboriginal people on country in Australia, and I've said many times, are completely formative and life-changing. And some of those experiences, you have to pinch yourself to that you're a part of that. That's just so amazing. And one of the most incredible things about that whole situation that I thought, reflecting upon some of the experiences I've had is that, listen, sublime generosity that Aboriginal people have comes, after everything that's happened to them. Don't you think it's just amazing, and what a incredible strength, and what a message to send, to say that, we were treated really badly, but we're not beaten or broken by this. We're affected by it, but, we're still open to sharing this knowledge and this and this information with people, and to the right people, to the people that care about it and will treasure it and share it with other people. And they were saying to me, that this is here for all of Australia if you respect it. And I think it's something that, all Australians should learn about, but also feel a sense of pride about, no matter where you come from, whether you're a migrant like myself, or you're part of the settler generation. It's something that we all should hold so dear. And in New Zealand, we, to a large extent, we do.
Is there a story you can share about one of those experiences and how you have come to understand an ingredient better, and what you've done with it since, after that understanding?
Yeah, there's so many stories that I could tell with you. You'd need hours to listen to me, but I'll share you with a couple with you, because they speak to my own personal ignorance, and what Australians need to do is just get over themselves a little bit. That's what I would say. And by that I mean get over your fear, and don't get over the past, but get over your fear. Your fear is holding you back from learning. Your fear is holding you back from paying proper respect to First Nations people. And that's my experience, but it's also my observation of my community, the non-Indigenous community. So I can kind of speak to that. I can't speak to Aboriginal people or Torres Strait Islander people, but I can speak to my own community. So, I can tell you this trip that I took is many years ago now, where I was up on country, Yuin country. In fact, in Yuin country, it's not just in New South Wales, but in Victoria as well. And I visited Uncle Bruce Pascoe up there on his place, and we'd been fishing. I stayed the night, and the next day, we'd been fishing the night before, and we had some amazing fish. And then the next day, he took me to this little island just off Malakuta, and we pulled up the boat, and he wanted to show me bimblers, which are a blood cockle. And I wasn't familiar with bimblers then, and he showed me, how we got out of the boat. We were in shallow water and sort of on a sandbar, and we dug some bimblers out of the mud, and we took them back. And Uncle Bruce told me about how, his people of that area had been forced off the land after the Great Depression there, and starving. They'd been forced onto this island that was just off Malakuta there, and this is one of the special foods to them. This is one of the foods that they ate to survive, those and mutton shells that most people would know as abalone. And so that day, though, Uncle Bruce and I had to get back to Melbourne, so didn't have the time to be taught how to cook it by Uncle Bruce. And I took it back, and the next day I tried to cook it in the Attica kitchen the way that chefs would cook shellfish or pippies or cockles or mussels, and that is to put them in a hot pan, maybe with a little bit of water, and steam them very gently until they're just cooked and the shell's just opening. Blood cockles are very high in hemoglobin. They're really rich and bloody, and I cooked them this way, and I ate it, and honestly I thought, man, it's not for me. It's not very nice. This is really iodine-y and really bloody and kind of disgusting. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm not verbalizing it, but internally that's what I'm thinking. So I sort of discarded bimblers, because I was like, well, that's maybe not for me. And many, many years later, I'd met and become friends with another Yuin man, Uncle Noel Butler, Budawang Yuin man from the South Coast, Uncle Bruce's cousin. And we were becoming close, and he invited me up to stay with him and his amazing wife, Trish, and Kylie, my partner, and I went up there. And the first night that we were staying with them, Uncle Noel says to me, Ben, I think we're going to have a shellfish cook up tonight. He said, we'll go and get a whole heap of things, and one of the things that we're going to go and get is bimblers. And I thought it was like nails going down a chalkboard in my mind. I'm thinking to myself, goodness me. Anyway, I mean, he's an elder, Uncle Noel's in his 60s, and, I have so much respect for him. He's one of the foremost experts on native foods, how to grow them, how to harvest them. He's a botanist, an educator, a chef, a baker. He's just a legend. And so anyway, having as much respect for him, I didn't say a word, of course, never would. And we go down, we get the bimblers, and we get mussels and oysters, and we get some prawns, and we go back to his beautiful rainforest property, and he lights a fire and starts grilling the bimblers over the open fire. And 10 minutes pass, and I'm thinking, whew, it's a long time on the grill for those bimblers. 15 minutes pass, and I'm starting to think internally. I'm thinking, wow. And the chef and me is just going, well, it's a long time. 20 minutes, and I'm thinking, man, Uncle Noel was cooking the shit out of those bimblers. Like he's really cooking them, and it's taking all of my strength not to try to remove them from the grill, And 30 minutes goes by, and they're all like black and burnt looking. And Uncle Noel goes, I think they're ready. And I'm like, yeah, I reckon they're ready, all right. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And he takes them off, and they're, like I said, they're really charred. And inside they look quite dry and a bit rubbery. And anyway, I take one off the grill, and I put it in my mouth, and it's utterly delicious. And I just thought, in that moment, it was like one of the biggest smackdowns of my whole cooking life. And it dawned on me that, I don't have the cultural context. I haven't been on this country for tens of thousands of years like Uncle Noel and his family. And how could I know, So, that's my story of ignorance. It opened my eyes a great deal. And I haven't, only recently have I had the courage to tell Uncle Noel and Uncle Bruce that story, and they thought it was hilarious. It was so funny. Now, it's happened a few times. Many times. And so you really got to check yourself. You're as small as a grain of sand in the history of this ancient country, and that's humbling, but also fascinating. And what a neat place to be. What a country to cook in, where we've got the oldest cuisine in the world. That's just remarkable to me. And it's and I just couldn't be anywhere else now. There's just so many ingredients and so many things to learn, so many great people, and what a place to cook.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking to add a slightly firmer texture. So there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
Attica has been an establishment that's been known for continuous evolution. You always operate with an inquisitive mind and look into new things. But what is it that drives you and makes you go out on a limb like that?
Well, I just like people a lot. I love people. I believe in people. I believe in Australia. I believe in the people that live here. I believe in the good of people. And so that's a huge motivating factor. Australian people have been incredibly good to me. I felt from the moment that I came here, I felt home, always felt welcomed. Of course, Aussies like to hang a little bit of shit on a Kiwi fella, but it's all good-natured stuff, the sheep jokes and the like. But I think for me, I would say that I get bored relatively easy, so I have to keep doing things. And I don't get bored in the way that I've only ever run this one restaurant, and recently a pop-up restaurant in the Yarra Valley, but I've only sort of ever focused on this one thing. So I guess I don't get bored that easy. But what I like a lot of different things going on to stimulate me and to motivate me and to inspire me. And my world view is expansive. I look at all kinds of different things and things that, you might not even imagine that might be helpful, hearing a song or looking at a painting or, going for a walk on the beach or whatever it might be. I mean, it's just endless ways to be inspired, listening to a podcast or meeting somebody new. It doesn't have anything to do with your industry or anything to do with cooking. I'm fascinated by how people go about it, and what they do and how they do it, and so that's just endless. I'm also incredibly lucky that I own a business where I've been able to, add in or meld all of these different influences and passions that I have in my life, like the arts and making, culture, music, cooking, of course, and the greatest one of all, service, trying to understand the human spirit. I think that's what we kind of try to do. And the older I get, the more I realize it's about that. It's about understanding people. And people are fascinating, but the more that you can know about them and the more that you can know about their habits, the better you can be, because the better you can serve them. And that's probably the great beauty of running a restaurant, is just actually that service component. At a certain point, we can all cook pretty great, we have different expressions, but at a certain level, everybody's cooking, wonderfully, using different ingredients, sure, different interpretations for sure. But how does the restaurant make you feel when you come? That is absolutely deeply fascinating and motivating to me. And some of the most incredible experiences of my life have been in this building and around this place, and it could be, letters. I recently wrote about some of the letters that we've had during the lockdown, and you have to pinch yourself to imagine that anybody would write these things to you. Many, many times in my career, here we've had people here for their last meal. I mean, what an incredible privilege that is, to cook somebody, something from their bucket list, basically. That blows my mind. There are a lot of negative things if you want to focus on them, in life, in all industries and all aspects, restaurants included. But I'm interested in telling a positive story and just getting the most out of it in terms of enjoyment for myself, the team, and of course, first and foremost, for our guests.
Attica and yourself have won so many accolades and global recognition. Have you thought about what Attica might look like after all of this experience, when life gets back to normal after COVID? Will it be different?
I think it can't help but be different. I think it would be foolish if it wasn't different. I think it can be better. One of the things that I've loved is the sense of community spirit, the closeness that I feel to Melbourne. I'm so grateful. It'll make me tear up talking about it. Like, just so grateful to Melbourne. What a place, so just what it'll be like after, it's like, that's a brilliant thing to ponder, I'm excited for what that is, I think there was a time during this where I asked myself, and Kylie and myself asked each other, is this really what we want to do? I think there's a point in COVID with Attica, do we want to continue to do this? And, it's at one point in time I was definitely sitting on the fence about it, but, going to the Yarra Valley and having a bit of a break from the restaurant for the first time in 16 years was good for me, doing something else and running a different type of restaurant while the team ran this restaurant for 5 months. When I came back, I think I was probably still thinking, do I really want to do this? Because this is not something you can half do. This is something you can only do to the absolute maximum, and it takes everything you've got. So if you're going to do it, you've got to do it right. And I've always said to myself, I never want to be that guy that lets the shine go off it, that lets it deteriorate and just uses it as a money-making machine. I never wanted to be that person. That's not inspiring to me. And so I thought, if I don't want to do it, I'll definitely go out on a high, So I was still thinking about that, I think, through the earlier part of this year. And but when I came back, I kind of fell in love with it again. I probably had I brought back a lot of positivity and enthusiasm from doing summer camp. And when I came back, I just wanted to put that on it. And Kylie too, we both just started to feel really good about it again. I think it's really natural to question where you are in life, especially in business. And, I don't really view my personal life so separate to the restaurant. And I don't, it's not a means for an end to me. This is like a huge part of my life and a very enjoyable part. And so, I just wanted to make sure that if I was going to recommit for the next, 15 years or 10 years or 5 years or however long, I mean, it's more than 5 years that I'll commit. Maybe I'm going to do this till I'm 65. I'm not sure, but I had to be sure, and I came back and really made the decision that yes, I do want to do this, but I do want to do other things as well. And I don't want it to be defined by this, and I don't want to be defined by just being a chef either. There's so many things that I think are possible to do within a restaurant, and I want to achieve a lot of those things.
You mentioned the importance of connection and community and what impact it's had on you during this time. Do you think it'll have an impact on the industry as a whole, and the industry will change out of these circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's humbling, when you're, somewhat of an international sensation, to have that taken away from you. I think it's a good thing for me. Like, that's, I don't see that as a bad thing. I think I was probably growing a little bit tired of that anyway. I think from the outside, when you're a young chef, you want to win an award. And there's no doubt that I really wanted to win an award before I'd ever had one. And then when I got one, I was like, sheesh, this doesn't feel that great, It really doesn't feel that great. And so over time, it was sort of like, well, this just doesn't really matter to me. I'm really grateful for them, and they've helped our business a great deal. I would never underestimate that or poo-poo them. It's not, I'm grateful for everything we've got, and my staff appreciate it as well. But there was a point where I was kind of like, well, that's not what it's about. And it never was about that. Actually, you thought it was when you were 27, before you won one. And then when you won one, you realized, it's actually got to be about the everyday and the every moment, and every experience that you're going to have. And if you were cooking, I always kind of believe if you were cooking for awards, you'd never win one anyway, because you're so frozen with your own fear that you might do something wrong. And I like taking risks with cooking and running the restaurant a great deal. It's exhilarating, and so to answer, that question, I think, yeah, we will change. I think, it changed so much already in the last 6 years that we were probably not even recognisable from what it was in the beginning. But at the same time, you need to try to find, a little bit of that magic from the beginning as well and carry that through. And I think it's important for me to convey the stories of the early days of the restaurant to the staff here, and I have done that, and we're doing that before this latest lockdown, weekly actually, storytelling about what it was like to be here in 2005 and 2007 and 2009. Yeah, because there's only a handful of people here that have been here for a long time. Matt has been here for 10 years, the head chef. Kylie's been here for it would be about 7 or 8 now, I think. And Paul, one of our senior front of house people, has been here for about 12. So those people have perspective and know what it was like, But for new people that have come here, they might just see that it might just seem like a very shiny thing. And of course, you work here for a little while, you realise it's not. It's hard work like anything. But for outsiders, it's very important to understand that it's been a struggle here. I guess that struggle has been well documented, but nothing comes easy, especially through independence. There's nobody to back us up here. It's just us. So, we've really got something to fight for. But to understand the history is very important, and the highs and the lows, and to just tell it how it is, to not to overtell it, but not to gloss over it either.
What have you learned in the last year and a half that would be good advice to young operators just starting out in the industry?
Be kind, just be kind to everybody to the best of your ability. Sometimes I know it's not easy. We all get mad. We all lose our cool sometimes, but there's just a dire need of kindness just everywhere. So don't be a jerk. That's my advice to you, and I mean that in every single way. I mean, don't ruin the planet with bad decisions, so don't be a jerk to the planet, think about where your food comes from, really give a damn, and don't use your ignorance as an excuse not to know. There's so much resources out there to learn about fish, to learn about waste, to learn about plastics and recycling and composting. Don't be a jerk to your staff. they are everything to you and they're everything to me. So without the staff, you've got nothing and you are nobody. And so that's like a real sound piece of advice I can give you, the most sound. The better you can treat them, the better you can make the environment. Don't do it because you're going to benefit from it, but you will benefit from it. It's counterintuitive to think that a horrible environment is helpful for performance. It's not helpful, okay? It's really unhelpful. Nobody likes working in a regime that's built on fear, suffering, and inequality. So make sure that you lead with kindness when you lead your team. I mean, we're all pretty kind to our customers, but if there's a little thing that you can do, like extra for them, like they'll be with you forever. The smallest thing, and I'll give you an example. Somebody wrote to us asking for the recipe for the salad dressing. And the salad dressing is the simplest recipe. I couldn't even believe that anybody would want it. Seriously. But rather than just give them to it, we just send them a bottle of salad dressing, If they love it that much, then, like if you can find it within yourself to do little things like that, where there's not really any return. And then the last thing is, really like just make sure you keep your books in check, right? Like if you don't know how to do accounting, that's fine. I'm not the greatest. But find somebody who's an expert in it, please. And that might be the saving of you. That might be the saving of your business and your company, because that's been the saving of mine, that I have experts on the bookkeeping and the accountancy and in the HR. And they cost a lot of money, and I pay them willingly and happily. They are like family, and so what that allows is just for everything to be cool, You just want everything to be cool. And I have a strong conscience, unfortunately, for me. That's a bit of a pain, and some people would say it's a weakness in business. But my problem is that if bad stuff has happened or things are wrong, I can't sleep. I can't leave here feeling good. I'll leave here and I'll feel like shit until it's good. So problems, I deal with them in the moment every day, and I overcome them. And any disputes, any issues, they're settled in the moment when it arises. Now, not in anger, not in the heat of it, and sometimes maybe you need to just step out of it if it feels like it's going that way. Just step back, just take 15 minutes, half an hour, because your mind will be different, and when you give it a little bit of time. And this is a little bit older me talking, and then come back and really try to, listen to what the person's saying to you. Now, you don't have to agree to it, but at least listen to it, and then have a considerate conversation about it and resolve the issue. Because seriously, it's not worth fighting over small things. It's not worth arguing about little things. They'll eat you up, and all that anger will make you very sad, and so that's just kind of, just everything be cool. That's kind of the best thing that I could say, just everything be cool. And then when like the parents of your staff come to your restaurant and eat, you can go out to the table and like shake their hand and like have a really nice conversation, because, you're taking care of your responsibilities, and that is, everything actually as the owner. So as long as you understand that everything's your responsibility, and the buck stops with you, then everything's big, that everything's cool. But just old-fashioned values, Yeah.
Well, Ben, you're an absolute inspiration, and we're honoured to have you on Deep in the Weeds today. I know there's so many more stories that we can share, but perhaps we can catch up again down the track and share them at that time. Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
That'd be lovely. Thanks so much, Huck. Take care.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.